Hey, everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And this week, I have a very special guest. It's actually our 100th episode, which I did not plan on, but just kind of how the weeks worked out. And if you guys are into Bigfoot, if you know about Bigfoot in the Adirondacks, if you know the name Whitehall, if you know the name Abair Road, then you know the name of our guest tonight, Brian Gosselin. Brian, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, you're entirely welcome. Glad to be on the show.
Yeah, and I've always enjoyed your story. Um, Very famous story from here in New York. And again, a lot of people, when they think of Bigfoot, they think of the Pacific Northwest, they think of Canada. A lot of people, if they're not in the know, they don't really think of, oh, Bigfoot could be in New York. And upstate New York has the Adirondack Park, Adirondack Mountains, and just a lot of wild areas up there where sightings do take place. And your story, of course, is a very famous one. You and your wife Sue wrote the book Abair Road, the true story, which is available on Amazon. I will link to that down below so people can find that. And I know you've told the story, a bunch of times, but I would love to hear your story because I really do love your story, and I'll get into that after. But I'm going to let you talk a little bit here because I'm sure the audience would love to hear your story again. So, can you just tell us a little bit about what happened to you in 1976 and what you were doing in life and how you came to have this experience?
Well, sir, I was working on the police department. The initial night, not my night, but the night before, when it was reported to me by my brother Paul and his friend Marty Paddock, and they come by, and I had radar set up on Route 4 in Whitehall, the intersection of Route 4 and William Street, and I heard, you work nights and you get to know the sounds of different vehicles, especially the ones that want to go hot rod and so on and so forth. But anyway, I heard the truck coming. I said, that sounds like Marty Paddock's truck. It just had a certain tone. It was loud. It was, a souped up pickup truck to an extent. And I just see him coming. I'm thinking to myself, I said, well, you're going to, you're going to be in trouble. So anyway, next thing you know, he whipped across in front of me and did a quick U-turn because they more or less knew where I was when I was operating radar. And they pulled in, and they're both wound up to the max. I mean, these guys are so overexcited to the extent my brother Paul and Marty both. We just saw a monster out on Abair. We just saw that it went on and on and on about a monster out on Abair Road. And I said, "Were you guys smoking a little wacky tobacco to have a couple of brewskis or something?" I said, "What's going?" No, no, no. I could tell these guys were legit. They're no alcohol involved, so on and so forth that I could smell. But that's beside the point. So I said, I can't go out there. I can't leave. I said, being a village police officer, I couldn't just take off if I were in pursuit or called there to cover an accident or something by the trooper or the sheriffs, then I could go out. But anyway, my dad had just gone off duty. In the meantime, my brother and his friend Marty headed down to the Petco station. It used to be a little garage here downtown Whitehall, and picked up Bart Kenny, and he went back out there with him. So I called my father, who had just gone off duty. He was a sergeant in the Whitehall PD, and I said, "Dad," I explained everything to him. He says, "Just tell me to calm down." He says, "Just call the troopers, call the sheriffs, and tell them I'll meet them out there." So that's what I did. So everything that transpired the very first night is only hearsay to me because I wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I got talking to my dad and my brother the next day, and my dad was telling me, he says, you'd had to seen it, so on and so forth. But anyway, we had this one trooper who, because I worked next night was a Tuesday night, and that was my only night off during the week. I worked six nights a week. And the trooper got a hold of me, and he says, "Hey, you want to go out on Abair Road, see if we can see a monster?" And he had a little chuckle to his voice, And I says, "Yeah, I'll go out. I said, got nothing better to do. Used to staying up at nighttime anyway." So we headed out there, and I don't know, probably around 11:15 or so at nighttime. And he went up on the upper part. If anybody knows Abair Road, it's the way it's shaped. Is he's up on a hill on a sharp turn, and that field he was in, he was only roughly, I'd say, 50 feet, maybe a little bit further off the road in a field, farmer's field that had been mowed. The grass was probably 6-8 inches high, green grass. And we go down a slight hill into a dip and up onto a flat landing, and there's a huge meadow on the right. And prior to my night, they saw it. What they heard on my side of the road was what they thought was like a pig squealing or a woman possibly being molested and or whatever. And they end up seeing it on the left-hand side of the road. And the night before my incident, there were, like I said, 2 sheriffs, 2 state troopers, my dad, Bart Finney, Marty Paddock, and my brother Paul. And they all saw the same thing that was reported to me, not all exactly the same time because of the lay of the land on the other side of the road. It's dips and hills and dips and hills and then goes into the woods. So when we went out, me and this trooper, he was on duty, I was off duty. I had my own car. And I drove out in the field roughly 300 feet, 400 feet out into the field before it started going down into a dip. I stayed on top of that dip. And I dare say there's probably at least 1,500 to 2,000 feet between where the troopers parked and where I'm parked. And he can't see me and I can't see him. And I'm trying to give you the lay of the land in the sense that to the north of where we are parked, it's what they call East Bay. It's where the Potney River ends at the Carvers Falls Dam, and East Bay begins at below the dam, which in turn flows into Lake Champlain down in front of the locks in Whitehall. And we got talking on CB radio. We found a channel that was, you know, there wasn't a lot of skip on it and a lot of noise on it, and that's how we were communicating, me and the state trooper. And while we're sitting there, this is getting to close to midnight, and off in the distance, you'd hear every once in a while, it's like a tree breaking or a tree, dead limbs being snapped or something, but it was so dead quiet out in farmland for the month of August, with the tree peepers and killdeers and crickets and you name it, all the things you hear, there was nothing. There was absolutely no sound whatsoever. And there was no moon. It was a clear night. And, well, like I said, we kept in contact on the CB radio, and we called him Mr. Fox in the book. But anyway, he calls me and he said, Brian, did you hear that? Did you hear that? I says, yeah. I said, how can you not hear it? It's, you know, there's good-sized trees being either bent over, snapped, or good-sized dead limbs being broken off. And it would start and stop. Maybe every 15 minutes, 20 minutes, you'd hear something. Well, between the trooper and myself, all the woods came to a point on the sharp turn coming down that hill. In other words, it's about maybe 50 feet wide, which it still is right now. And there's a meadow behind the trooper, and I'm in a meadow. And all of a sudden, all I can recall is hearing the trooper saying, "Brian, did you know what the fuck, I'm getting out of here." And boom, he did. He blew by me like I was sitting still, and which I was.
Wow.
But anyway, as he's booking down through there, I says, he's yanking my chain. He's either got a call he's going on, or he just wants to get the hell out of here, so on and so forth. But this man was in a rush. So then I get thinking about the night before. I said, there's no reason to disbelieve. And the only one that ever admitted to it the night before me was one deputy sheriff. Admitted to what he saw, and he got involved in this stuff afterwards. And his name was Glenn Rose, and God bless his soul. He was a really, really good deputy sheriff, and he was really into this stuff. But he admitted to what he saw. But as time went on, the trooper's been gone for a while, and I started. Within 15, 20 minutes, I heard like the brush at that point on the road. It sounded like something else break, and then a few minutes later, I started hearing this whooshing noise. And I always described it the same as that a person wearing corduroy pants and their thighs are rubbing together. And it would start and stop. And you got to realize that the field I'm in had not been mowed whatsoever by the farmer. And I had a 71 Monte Carlo, and top of the grass was a little bit above the fenders of my car. It was up to my waist.
Okay.
It was the height of the grass. And when I had pulled in that field, the first thing I did was open my door. Of course, I locked the door on the passenger side with the window up, and I took my dome light out, so I'm completely in the dark. There's nothing distracting me. So now I'm hearing this whooshing noise. I said, that sounds like, walking in the dry grass. That's what it sounded like. So I'm spotlighting. You got to realize I'm on a hill and looking to the east. It goes down a hill, across a real slight valley, then up another hill into the woods below where the trooper was sitting.
Mm-hmm.
So all the time I'm using the spotlight, and I can hear this stuff. And in the middle, there's still some cattails there. There used to be cattails down through there because it's a very small brook area where you get your runoff from the melt out of those fields and the hills, and all runs down there and goes into the Pontley River. And there were cattails there, and I this sounds sort of corny, but I can remember as a kid, I'm a triplet, and my dad told us we were smoking cattails when they were kids. So, we're just kids. I know we were maybe 13, 14. So there's a marsh across the road from our house where we live out here in the country. And we go down, we get the cattails. So we're puffing on those things. It's nothing like a cigarette or anything like that. It was just my father got a chuckle out of it. So anyway, I said, that's cattails. I said, I know there's cattails in the field. I'm hitting it with a spotlight and I don't see anything. Then the sound started again with the whooshing noise. What the hell is whatever it is getting closer? By now, I'm a little bit on the scared side. I know there's something there. I can't see nothing. Well, next thing I know, something's telling me turn your light on now. And right off the fender of my car, roughly 30, 35 feet out, here's this creature, 7.5 to 8 foot tall, covered with hair. As soon as I hit it with the spotlight, it brought its hands up and covered its eyes to an extent and put its head back and let out such a deep, deep guttural roar, growl combination. It would take 3 men's lung capacity just to get the longevity, let alone the volume this thing had.
Wow.
And it was instantaneous as soon as I saw it. But when that growl come out, excuse me, I had so many thoughts in my head instantaneously, and they say your life flashes before your eyes. God is my witness. I remember my childhood right up to, and I think I was 24 years old at the time. Everything that had transpired in my lifetime was there in one massive thought. And all I can hear in my head is, I'm not going to hurt you. Not going to hurt you. I'm not going to hurt. This is what I'm hearing in my head. And this thing brought his hands up, threw its head back, and that's when it turned to its left. And I could see the hair hanging down like an orangutan. And so I always described it as a dark red, almost black. And it was hanging down on its arm. It turned to its left and proceeded to leave. Now I got the spotlight right on its back, and I can see all the muscle structure working, because my first instinct is, this a man in a monkey suit? Is it this? Is it that? I know what it isn't.
Right.
Or, I know what it is, but I know what it's not a bear. It's not a man. It's, there's just too many facts pointing to it. I mean, I can see muscle structure the whole 9 yards. And in its hair on the back, it was rolled in. It was a little bit thinner on the back, and you could see twigs, leaves, and the gray clay, because it's all clay down in there. And I said, well, geez, this thing must have been nesting, laying down or slid down a bank or something, got all this stuff in its back. But I'm sitting there and I'm standing there with my gun pulled the spotlight on it, shaking like a leaf. And I'm surprised the gun didn't go off, because I was shaking so damn bad. Was I scared like a kid with the boogeyman? No. I'm looking at something that don't exist, and yet there it stands right there in front of you. And now is it an alien? Is it this? Is that? I mean, all these thoughts are just bang, 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 bang into your head. And this thing proceeded to go across the field, kitty corner, and went into the very corner of the meadow. And I watched it for it would take you and I maybe 5 minutes, 8 minutes to walk it, and if it's walking fast. This thing was down there in probably 4 or 5 minutes.
Wow.
And I remember I had the spotlight still on all the time I was there. I had the spotlight on it. And when it got down to the woods, it turned and looked back at me and just let out 3 different kinds of guttural sounds. And I just almost instantly got a feeling of calm. And I got a thought in my head, leave us alone. We just want to be left alone. So now I sit there for a good 45 minutes anyway, gathering my thoughts. What did I just see? What this? What that? You know, you're questioning your own sanity. Put it that way.
Right.
And anyway, I finally got up and about, got out of the field, and I headed to Whitehall. And there used to be a place down there called the Silver Diner. It was a diner right on the very corner of 22 and 4 when you come into Whitehall. It was a well-frequented restaurant for the cops and truck drivers and everybody else. But we always sat in the back. And this trooper, I walked in. I see the car was down back, and I was out front with my own car. I walked in, and Pauline Wilbur was her name. She was the waitress. She said, "What's going on with Mr. Fox tonight?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said, What's going on with him? He said he's out there, he's dead silent, shaking like a leaf, blah, blah. I said, that's just something that transpired a little while ago. I said, he'll be all right. So I walked out and I looked at him. And I'm standing there, he's just sitting there at the table, and his hands are shaking, there's coffee spilled on the table. And I said, "Mr. Fox, what did you see?" Mr. Fox, the 3rd time I yelled it. "What did you see?" He just looked straight up at me. He said, "I didn't see anything."
Wow.
Dropped his head, and that's the last words I ever had with that man.
Wow.
Honest to God. And I was on the PD for a while longer, and he was on the PD on the troop with the troopers a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
So the next night, this isn't in the book. This is something I found out quite a ways down the road. In fact, it was just, I think, 3 years ago I found this out. Donnie Peterson is his name. He's a retired state trooper. Him and this other trooper worked together along with we had about 6 troopers in that barracks. And he was standing at the counter over to the Big Apple Diner where I hang out, where we sell books.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife gave him the elbow. Said, tell Brian what you told me last night. She gives it to him again, you know. He goes, all right. And she says, "Brian, you got a minute?" I says, "Yeah." Then we would over sat at the table. He says, "You remember the night back in August about the Bigfoot, encounter?" And I says, "How can I forget it?" He said, "Well," he says, "the next night I was the senior officer." And he said, "I got there early. I got dressed because they were working 3 to 11. And he says to his partner, who was this Mr. Fox, comes walking in. He says, "Geez, you're in a hurry tonight?" He says, "Yeah." He said, "I am in a hurry. Get your rear end in gear, get dressed." He said, "We're taking a ride." He said, "Why? Where are we going?" He said, "We're going out on Abair Road and see if we can." Oh, no. And this guy lost. And Don said, "Brian, he lost it." "No, god dang way." He said, "I'm going to go anywhere near that effing place, and I don't want nothing to do with it." And he said, "I'm the senior officer tonight. You're riding with me." He says, "You're going."
Wow.
"No, I'm not," he said. And he says, "Number one," he said, "we got 2 cars. You be in one, I'll be in the other. You need me, you call me, I'll be there, but I'm not going out Abair Road."
Mm.
This is the guy that said he saw nothing.
Right.
So, and in the meantime, he had already talked to our dispatcher the next morning. We had our own dispatcher in the village of Whitehall for the police department. We weren't county dispatch, we were local. We had our own dispatcher. He told him exactly what he saw. And this dispatcher told me he saw exactly what you saw. He said he just couldn't deal with it.
Wow.
And I've had people say to me, "Well, the state trooper's scared." I said, "He's a human being just like anybody else. You take the uniform off, he's just another man."
Yeah, exactly.
But all the things that transpired in those 2 nights was outrageous. But now I'm going to touch base on a lot of people don't know. And this stuff was in the books. And the thing of it is, all this stuff that I logged in the book about the whole incident in the police blotter, that whole bladder's ended up missing. I spent almost 4 years trying to find that blotter. Nobody knows where it is.
Really?
What happened to? Oh yeah, seriously. I chief of police and police commissioner, where's the book? Where's the book? I got a few things I got to prove. I said, I know I wrote all this stuff in the book and blah, 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 from the initial report to me to the next night. We didn't know. We didn't know what happened to the book.
Mm.
So, oh yeah. So one thing led to another anyway, but prior to that, let alone after that, we had reports galore from people, and I got to realize I was in my 20s. These are people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s coming and telling us a few years later of things they had experienced in that same area.
Mm-hmm.
And I live right in that. That's where I live, is up near the Abair Road anyway. And we got a good sized mountain, Peckswood's mountain there. It's not a huge mountain, but there's a lot of swamp, a lot of wilderness in between the roads, and so on and so forth. And they are still here. They come and go as they please. The odd thing with it is that I've done probably, my God, I want to say 300, 400 investigations since that thing. When I started getting into it, because I kept my mouth shut. We came from a large family. We were poor, so on and so forth, most of our lives. And, of course, we got poked fun of. But they didn't say anything about the troopers or the sheriffs or anybody else involved, just the Goslins.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I went a good, I want to say 15 years, close to 20 years, and I never said nothing to anybody. I had to throw news media out of my house, getting me up, banging on the door, because I work nights, and I go home, go to bed.
Right.
Banging on my door, wanting to talk. So on and so forth. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff that went on, and it just got completely out of control. I just kept my mouth shut. That's all there was to it. So 10 years later, Dan Gordon, God rest his soul, he was a part-time police officer for a while. Him and his partner had an experience very similar to mine on Route 22 north of Whitehall. It's you're still in the village, put it that way, but you're headed towards Dresden Clemens area, headed north out of Whitehall towards Chai. And what he thought was a bear, and he got out of the patrol car and took his flashlight. It was late night, early morning. And he said, Brian, he said, I thought you were crazy for all the time. I've heard this story about you and that. He said, I thought you were crazy until I saw what I saw. And he took it to his grave, just like I will. He said, wow. I know what I saw. You know, it's just so many things that, that's where I lost track there too. Is prior to my, even Paul and my dad and all their reports, that if you back up a week from the 24th, and then back up another 5-6 days, UFO reports were flying into PD, state police, the sheriffs, and this was all the way from the northern part of New York City,
mm-hmm.
all the way up into the tip of Maine.
Wow.
And I kid you not, anybody at work nights, if they went outside, if they spent an hour outdoors, they'd see 3-4 things you just couldn't explain. Things that come in like a rocket and just stop in the air, pulsate and take off. And this was all in that police blotter, everything. And then the next week is dead silent.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. Then all of a sudden, these things pop up. And a lot of people don't realize these creatures have been reported from way back in the early 1800s in the Champlain Valley by the British, by everybody involved with fighting the wars coming up and down the Champlain Valley. And it goes all the way down into the northeastern part of New Jersey. I mean, the Catskills. It's all over the place. And, you know, God bless you if you don't believe. But somewhere along the line, just like with all the UFO files that they're opening up and everything else, I've always said, and I take it as written script. The government is preparing us for something because they're releasing way too much stuff. And even the Prime Minister of Canada, it was right on the TV program, that the last UFO they got, he says, we're tired of them. He says, the Prime Minister said it right on television, we gave the last one to the United States, let them deal with it.
Wow.
And he was the one that come out and said I think he said 7 different species. This is only about 8, 9, 10 years ago. He said, we know there's at least 7 species of them. Now who do you believe? You know what I'm saying? I mean, they're throwing all this stuff at you, but people walk straight as an arrow. They don't want to look up. They don't want to look down.
Oh yeah.
Most of them got their eyeballs invested in cell phones nowadays, because you would truly be amazed. We being in the Northeast, and this was on another program too. And in fact, I read an article on this, that they chase more UFOs on the eastern seaboard than they do any place else in this country.
Yeah, I believe it. You know, and it's like you said, you know, a lot of people, they don't look up anymore. They don't go outside anymore.
Wow.
And how, you know, it's very easy to be skeptical, you know, and be a skeptic and say, oh, these things don't exist, if you never leave your living room. You know, if you're just constantly on your phone or watch.
If you don't want to, right? If you don't want to believe, you're not going to believe. It could land right in your front yard. You're not going to believe it.
Right. And yeah, a lot of people just don't want to. They don't want to accept, you know, the years and decades and hundreds of years of stories of these things.
Yeah. Well, the Green Mountain Boys out of Vermont, when they went down to Gettysburg to fight. And that's a place. If you've never been, you got to go. I went there 3-4 years ago with my wife. If you go down there and don't shed tears, man, there's something wrong, because I was so totally overwhelmed with the monuments. And I mean, we did the whole thing from one end to the other. The death, you can still feel it to this day. I kid you not. But it's
my father and I, we go down there about twice a year if we can. My uncle and my son.
That is one fabulous place.
Oh yeah, we love it down there. It's just full of history, and like you said, you can't go down there and not feel the weight of what happened there.
Yeah,
still to this day.
That's true.
So yeah,
but you know, I get a kick out of it, because I've watched so many different ancient alien things and all these different programs about UFOs and all that stuff. But all these scientists and stuff now, no matter what, I can't think of the guy's name that was a firm. He was hired by the military to disprove all the UFO sightings from way back.
Oh, Dr. Hynek.
Thank you.
Yeah,
that man. Then he finally ended up. He was a true believer. And he was a skeptic from hell, but he was hired by the military and the government to. It's just a weather balloon, swamp gas, and whatever. But it's just to this day. Jason, if I go in the woods and we're on an investigation, in fact, we're taking a group out with us on our next investigation. They're from up north. And you'd have to ask my wife, but I get a feeling. Ever since my encounter, I know when they're around. If I get into a certain area, 8 times out of 10, we'll find evidence, either cast, or other evidence. A lot of stuff we find we don't report.
Right.
It's so easy nowadays, because we've caught so many people trying to pull skin or the wool over our eyes, that all you got to do is like, read my book, get all these reports together, and you can come up with the biggest, craziest, believable hoax on the face of the earth. And people have tried it, even on television, with the Bigfoot coming out of this guy's got a drone way up in the air. You got a Bigfoot coming out of the woods. It looked good from the air. It looked pretty damn good.
Right.
Well, and then this lady over here at the diner that works there, Teresa, she says, Brian, oh my God, you want to see what they had on television last night? I said, what's that? They got a Bigfoot, and I said, they got a camera on it off of a drone up in the air. I said, really? I said, no. I said, where did I see it? I don't know if it was on television or somebody showed it to me on Facebook. Well, it was 2 or 3 days later, that same thing was being shown. Now they're showing the Easter Bunny coming running from the south, running towards the Bigfoot, and they're hugging in the middle of the field. I said, see? I said, and the people that believe and have had stuff happen to them like me, I said, that just makes us look foolish. They're taken away from, if we knew as much about them back then as we do now, we'd had something back then. We did get a cast out of that. I wasn't involved in the cast. Mr. LaRose was. He got a real good cast out of there. And we did walk down in there, I think it was 2 weeks later, myself and my nephew, and I found one hell of where this thing had to be where it was down the bank. onto the Vermont side of the Pontly River, because you'd swear a water buffalo had gone down this bank. You could see the skid marks from the feet. It's all clay. I don't know if you know how slippery clay can be.
Oh, yeah.
But there's this gray kind of wood that grows along a lot of the rivers and stuff up here. I don't know what they call it. Don't get really tall, but it's really thick and it's dark gray. And you could see where this thing had grabbed these things, trying to slow itself down. And like I said, it's like a water buffalo. I'd gone down into the river. And from that point on, but I found at the very top, I found the cast with just a heel, and of course, hardly an arch, but you could see the toes perfect in the front of the bank, because it was in the clay. It was its initial step off to go down the bank, and we had a cast of that. And guy Bill Brand, who's was into the Bigfoot big time ever since the Abair Road incident. He did 90% of the investigation out there. And he just passed away. I just went to his funeral 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
But he had that cast, and somebody picked it up, was handling, dropped it, and smashed it all out.
Oh, no.
But the Gun Rose had the whole cast, and his nephew, he's got it someplace up in West Haven, the cast that he took. I think it was 2 days after the incident.
Wow.
Down there.
Wow.
But like I said, there's just so much stuff that's going on, and it was just the most recent one was just before the Bigfoot Festival in Whitehall last year. My wife and I got a phone call, and in a straight line from my house to this spot might be 5 miles, 6 miles in a straight line.
Okay.
Out in Holcombville, and this guy's from Connecticut, and he's got a camp back in there. It's a hunting camp. That's all it is. And you go off the road, drive across this marsh. There's like a makeshift road. Then you get into the woods. It goes down in the gully. There's a swamp there with a little culvert. And then you go up a hill and down a hill. There's another swamp both sides. Then you go up another hill, down another. Then up you go. Bang, bang. There's his camp. And what he is like on a small hill. And 90% of it, the perimeter of his property is marsh. Okay. And he said he was in the outhouse. He said, normally I would take a gun out with me because of bears and whatnot. Because in a camp, they've got no indoor plumbing as far as that goes. So he said he's in the outhouse, and he started hearing this noise down over what sounded like right outside his little shack there. And he said, he started hearing these weird noises. Like, what kind of noises? He said, well, there was sort of like growling, and there was, he said something about a who or something. And I said, really? I said, well, what did you see? He said, I didn't see nothing. He said, I waited till I couldn't hear nothing. He said, I hurried up and got out of the place and went into the house. That's when he called me the next day. So, and we had a hell of a rainstorm off and on for a week and a half, 2 weeks, heavy rains. So I said, well, where is it? And he told us roughly where it was, across in front of his camp, looking to the west. And my wife and I went over. And it's all downhill, then it's level, and it's like a marshy bog. It's dead trees and so on and so forth, and then you got a little bit of water and cattails, and back up the other bank you go. And the first thing I spotted going down the bank was a bear tracks, good-sized bear. And we got down to the bottom. We started walking the edges of the bog. So we come to this one tree. My wife spotted something on the backside of this good size, huge. It's all a pine tree, mainly hemlock, and the needles are really, really thick on the ground, so on and so forth, like walking on a waterbed. Put it that way. And she said, "Honey," she says, "come here, look at this." I said, "I'll be damned." You could see the heel, and you could see the outline of the foot, and because the way it was sunk in, you could see part of the toes. And that's on the back side of the tree. So I said, I'm following this trail coming down the bank from the back side of the outhouse. And it led to that same area. And I'll be damned if we didn't find another track. There were 2 different tracks, 2 different sizes in the same spot. And we brought those casts. It's the first time ever we found 2 casts. It'll be like an adolescent and an adult. And the oddball thing of it is, where the bear come down the bank, it just immediately turned to its left and started on a run. You could see where the bear's claws were digging in as it's running and headed down the marsh. And these things were headed right in the same direction.
Wow.
So who was hunting who? That's the way I
Who's
said to my
chasing
wife.
who?
I said,
Yeah.
exactly. I said, it looks to me like these guys here want something to eat, or and we spent a good 5, 6, 7 hours in that place.
Wow.
And we didn't find any more castable tracks, but we did find them too.
All right. Nice. Wow. And that was the most recent one that you've heard of in that area?
Yeah, that would be a year and a half ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Year
Now,
and a half ago. We've had a few reports of possible vocalizations, but we've got so many people that have moved up in my neck of the woods, especially since 9/11.
mhm.
There's so many people from the city have moved up here. I mean, the foxes and stuff. They make noise. You swear to God that there's somebody being choked out there and they're hollering for help, and it's just a freaking fox. It's, I mean, every bump of the night is not a Bigfoot.
Right. Right.
And the way they make it out half the time is they must be in herds up here. There's so many
Right.
reports they're running around like a herd of cattle in a farmer's field. But we do follow up on well, I can't say everyone. 90% of them we follow up on.
hmm
But we do have a lot of pranks tried to be being pulled on us, and
I'm sure,
three.
people just like to cause trouble.
Well, the trouble is that they're just having a good time.
Yeah.
They can't not take that away from them. And these 3 kids in particular, I have to laugh because my wife and I weren't married yet. We were not even going out really. But anyway, we did an investigation over on the back road to Granville, and these 3 kids had reported. Well, the odd thing with it is we had a legitimate report, 2 legitimate reports about a mile away from them,
Mhm.
and we found evidence at both those places. In fact, 2 of the people even ended up taking a lie detector test,
Wow.
and they both passed with flying colors. So that's beside the point. But these kids, oh yeah, there's a Bigfoot over here. Been a report. Well, Bill calls us, and we in turn go over to these guys, and I know the family.
hmm
I says, so where was this thing standing? So we go across the woods. He says, see that tree right there? We could hear it banging something against the tree. I said, okay, we'll let that slide for now. Where'd it go? Went over there. So they went in the woods so far. So, well, we can't go any farther. We're scared. The oldest might have been 14. Youngest was probably around 10, 11. And now get into the woods. And I says, so where were you when you saw it? We're standing right about where we are now. Where was it? Right over there. See that hump right there? I said, yeah. He said it was standing on the backside of that looking at us. So I go around the backside of this thing, and you got to realize if you've been in the woods, when you get the pine trees, especially white pine trees, there's all kinds of dead small stuff on the bottoms of the trees, practically from the ground all the way up through.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got your live limbs. Well, if anything of that size, in fact, me walking through there, I was breaking those things off with my shoulders.
Right.
I said, anything of any size, there'd been a trail through this. But anyway, I got on the backside of this knoll. I says, where was it standing? He says, you got to come forward. You got to come forward. Next thing you know, I'm about 5 feet up the face of this ledge. Well, it was even higher than that. I said, you're guesstimating up to around 22, 23 feet. Well, that solved that problem, right? So they head out of the woods. And I went on, I says to Sue, I says, nah, I said, this is a bunch of hokey pokey. So I come out and I looked at the front of the house, and they got a little porch that juts out a little bit. And I said, it looks like a baseball bat. So I went over, and the boys were standing there in the yard looking at each other, whispering. And I picked the baseball bat up. I said, Jesus. And I picked it up with my nose, and I said, geez, smells like maple sap to me. And that's what the tree was beating. They beat on a maple tree with the baseball bat, and it said
Right.
it was Bigfoot knocking on. And I said, you little shit. But yeah, they got a laugh out of it. I'm quite sure of that after we left. We spent probably 3 hours there.
Wow.
I said, you little shits. And anyway,
Yeah, I mean, it sucks because it is a waste of your time, and
Yes,
you kind of want to focus, and again, people are having fun, but when it wastes your time, that's
exactly not at my expense anyway. But
yeah, just I don't really don't like that, and again,
no.
there's just so much in this field that misidentifications and people who want to see something, and they take a picture of the woods and, oh look, there's 6 Bigfoot hiding in the shadows there, and
oh yeah,
there's just so much nonsense that we really don't need the hoaxers on top of it, because there's just so many people who just, like you said, they hear a fox, people from the city or people who don't know any better, and like you said, every little bump in the night and every they don't know that it's a fox or a bobcat or fisher,
well,
or
it's
just anything else.
Like everybody thinking Oh yeah, if you listen, well, we packed Sunday afternoon, 1:30. We had a big black bear go right through the woods, right through our yard, my sister-in-law's yard, and my neighbor's yard. 1:30 in the afternoon. That in itself is rare.
Oh yeah.
But we do have bears. In the last 15 years, the bears are starting to move into this area too.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So how far are you from Abair Road now?
Right now,
Approximately.
I can be there. I can be at the spot in 10 minutes.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, that's how close I am.
Yeah.
I bought my brother's house. It was right next door to my parents.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, you took my friend Scott out. He's been on the show a bunch of times, but I know you took him out, and he's kind of the one who kind of made this possible. He reached out to Sue, your wife, and he kind of made this possible. But he's been trying to get me to talk to you for a while now, and I'm glad we finally connected.
And I just talked to a gentleman from Fort Ann too, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he got it all down on film and everything else, and it's like people say, "Oh, geez, Christ, you must have been there or heard something or saw something because your story never changes." It's just like when I talk about it, I'm reliving it. You don't forget something like that. It's like seeing the birth of your son or your daughter. You don't forget what that looked like.
Exactly. And you don't need to embellish it. It's an interesting story enough on its own. And I did have some questions for you though. You said you shine the spotlight on this, and it kind of shielded its eyes. Did you get any look at its face before it did that, or was it all? I can
remember the face was dark. It wasn't whiter color, light color like ours, but it wasn't jet black. I do remember, like the chin area, I could see white teeth, and they're whitish teeth, and they were more like our teeth. They weren't fangs.
Okay.
There was something about the nose. It was shaped different or something like that, but the eyes were red. You could tell by hitting them with a light that they were red, but they didn't glow.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? And they're about the diameter of mayonnaise jar covers. That's the way I always described it.
Right. Yeah, like big eyes. Yeah, because some people describe them as glowing, and other people just say it's like eye shine, like a deer, or any other animal in the woods at night. Any nocturnal animal will have the eye shine. And I always wonder about that, because the glowing eyes, and it just makes me wonder if people are just not familiar with eye shine, and they're seeing eye shine and they're saying the eyes were glowing. But some people will swear that like the eyes glowed. So that's always weird to me.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Like with Cliff Sparks, I don't know if you're familiar with that one. He had the incident on the Skeensboro golf course in Whitehall.
Oh, okay.
But his dog, while he was checking one of the greens at nighttime, he said his thing had like shooting like lasers like out of its eyes.
Right.
That was the way that story went. And the odd thing of it is that the gentleman that lives right straight across the road from him, he owns, I think, 40-something acres. He just happens to be a personal friend of mine, and he said, Brian, he said, we've had them on this property for years. He said, but the first time my mother thought we were crazy, she was in her 70s when she got to see it. She said it was out. He raises these grapes for making wine and stuff. He would sell them, and she said it was out there gorging itself on grapes. But he said, by the time I got to the other end of the house, it was broad daylight. Well, I'd say broad daylight, but it was late evening. And he said he just happened to catch it going back up in the woods. And his kid said he saw a female because he could see the breast on it.
Wow.
Up at a pond in the back. So there's all kinds of, in that whole general area. It's still East Bay area, Carvers Falls, Pontley River area. But it's just right from there, right straight down through the Whitehall, across 22, up into the hills of Tongue Mountain, western Fort Ann, up into the shores of Lake George. I've had troopers from Vermont and New York stop me or call me and tell me of things they had seen and where they saw them, but you can't use their names and so on and so forth, this kind of stuff. But a forest ranger, some people out of Camp Wakapatomi, that's on the east shore of Lake George, just a campground for Cub Scouts and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
Guys that had an experience while they're up there cleaning up, waiting for the people to come to show up. They're cleaning the place up, and he had an encounter. Not an encounter, but he did see what he saw. And it's the same area. And then everybody asked me, because I had an encounter What about what do you, it's not what do you think? It's why did they do it? I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I just
Yeah.
don't have all the answers. I can give you speculation. I can give you my idea, but we have learned a lot in different investigations and stuff that we really have.
Right, right. Now, did you hear a lot of stories about Bigfoot before your encounter? Like, because I know, like,
No.
now Whitehall is kind of the mecca in New York and maybe even the East Coast of just like Bigfoot sightings. And but prior to your sighting, did you hear many stories about this, or was it just
No, I
really?
can honestly say I didn't hear any.
Yeah.
Everybody asked me, did you go out as a believer? Well, I wasn't a true knockdown, drag out believer until I talked to my father and my brother, and in fact, a couple of the troopers and one of the sheriffs the next day before I had even gone out. And there's no reason for them to sit there and I'll tell you the same thing and be lying about it. It's point blank. There's no sense to that.
Right. And then afterwards, did you notice an uptick, or like, I know you mentioned like some people would come out and talk to you more about it and mention their stories, but was that an immediate sort of thing, or did that just happen years later?
No, not too long after. Within a week, we probably had, from Abair Road to where I live right now, we probably had, oh my goodness, I want to say 6-8 reports. And this one lady said this thing come out of the marsh, stepped over the fence. Of course, you got to realize 99% of the houses that are up here now didn't exist back then.
Right.
But this thing come out of the marsh, which is a long, narrow marsh, runs the whole length of this mountain right here by the house. But stepped out of the marsh over the fence and standing in water, which was a foot deep. The fence is almost 4 foot high, so stepped over it and went across the road in 3 steps and into the field on the other side, which was marshy. And there's several people that come forward. And in fact, you mentioned that there was a guy, a truck driver, a handful of months ago, told me that right up the road, right up here up the hill from my house, he said it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. He was just getting home. He was driving his big rig, and he says it was not a bear that went across the road in front of him because it walked across the road. He said, 7-8 foot tall, hairy creature, blah blah. I said bears don't walk across roads; they run. A bear can't even start to do the length of the legs, so on and so forth. They can't walk that far. Put it that way. They're too short-legged.
Yeah, and people
can they walk? Can they walk? Yeah, they can walk.
Yeah, they take a couple of steps and then they fall, and then they back down on 4 legs, and a lot of people don't realize like their back legs are shorter than their front legs.
Exactly.
So when they stand up, their arms are going to hang down, but they're going to have these stubby little legs. So for people to tell these stories about these creatures, walking, on 2 legs across, a 2-lane highway or a 3-lane highway in 2 steps, or like you said, stepping over a 4-foot fence, like a bear couldn't do that. A bear, they don't really stand up unless there's a reason to, and usually that's like a defensive stance, like they're trying to be aggressive or they're trying to reach some food, and if they do take a few steps, it's 1 or 2 steps, and then they kind of go back down.
That's
and,
right.
in the circus they're trained, but like in the wild, they're not going to walk more than a step or 2. So for people to see something walking a long distance, and again, people know what bears look like. I mean, you don't have to be a a hunter for your entire life, or a woodsman, or
exactly.
I mean, we all know what bears look like, and if you see something walking and you see its face and it throws its hands up in front of its eyes like to shield itself, I mean, that's not a bear. Bears don't do that.
No.
So I think that skeptical sort of, oh, it's just bears. And somebody had posted an article recently. I guess there was a new article released that says, oh, most Bigfoot sightings are bear. And
that guy don't know what a bear looks like.
No, exactly. And I can understand certain things. You get a glimpse of something in the distance and you can't quite see it, and it's behind some trees. Like maybe it was a bear, but if you have a clear look at something and you can see its face and you can see its arms moving and it's grabbing a fish out of the water, like if you have a much clearer sighting, it can't be a bear. So what is it? Is it a man in a suit? And I hate that excuse too, because how many guys, again, skeptics will say, oh, it's probably a man in a suit, it's a hoax. I wouldn't put on a suit and run through the woods like that. Like, you're going to get shot.
Well, you talk about that. Look at that deal out there in Washington, state of Washington. That guy that was dressing up in a suit. In fact, we had one right here in Hubbardton. It's just outside of Fairhaven, doing the same thing. He was a Vietnam War vet.
Mm-hmm.
But this one out in the western part of the country ended up getting killed. The first car hit him and knocked him down. The second car ran over and killed him.
Yeah.
And he was dressed in a suit.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a ghillie suit either. It was like a Bigfoot suit.
Right.
Like these damn fools. And they
again,
got a thought, yeah.
No, I'm sorry. People know when something is much too big. You see a man in a ghillie suit. I mean, a tall person is going to be 6 foot, 6'3", 6'4", a really tall guy.
Yep.
You put on a ghillie suit, maybe it adds a couple of inches, but you're not getting into that 7.5, 8 foot, 9 foot range.
No.
So, someone sees that, it's not a ghillie suit. It's not a person in a suit. So what are people seeing? It's not a bear.
No, I just saw too many specifics on this. I mean, just the muscle structure alone, watching it work, seeing it work, how much they about big burly thing. No, this thing looked like maybe it had missed a few meals.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't really. It was huge at the top, but in the center part it wasn't as bulky as you would think. No, and I thought about it a bazillion times after that, like maybe it was hungry.
Yeah, and I was going to ask.
One field.
No, I'm sorry. I was going to ask about that. Like, because everybody, when people think of Bigfoot, like even just people who aren't into this topic, the layperson who's not into Bigfoot or UFOs. I mean, you mentioned Bigfoot, they think of the Patterson-Gimlin footage.
Oh yeah,
Patty. And I was going to ask you, like, did it resemble that at all? And I mean, that's a bulky Bigfoot. That one did not look hungry.
Yes, it did. No. It did resemble that. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it did. Look at how, whoever it was that died first on their deathbed said it was a hoax. And then the other guy said it was a hoax. They'd hired somebody. They didn't even have the technology back then to create. Look at how many times they've tried to create with these professional athletes and all that stuff to get the stance, the walk, they couldn't. They haven't been able to disprove it.
Oh, I know. They can't. And anybody who says it was a hoax can't prove that. There's the guy, Bob Hieronymus, who says he was in the suit. Okay, well, show us the suit. Oh, I don't have it anymore. Well, show us proof. Show us a letter. Show us a receipt. I don't have anything. It's just my word.
Exactly.
All right. Yep. So then you weren't there. You weren't in the suit. And
who's to say they weren't paid off to sit there and lie? Who the hell knows?
Right. So yeah, very, very interesting. And you mentioned something else I wanted to go back to, which I thought was really fascinating, because you said when you shine the light on it and it's covering its eyes, you kind of had this in your head that this thing might be telling you, I'm not trying to hurt you. Don't shoot me.
That's all I could hear in my head is, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to hurt you.
Right.
That's all I could hear. And it was instantaneous. All I could hear.
And so in your head, did you hear it as a language, or did you hear it more as like did you actually hear words?
Words.
Wow.
Yep.
And
they talk about, that's what I meant to mention. There's an Indian shaman. This is when Seth Breedlove did his documentary up here, and he premiered the whole thing at the Whitehall Armory.
Mm-hmm.
There was an Indian shaman walked in, and I forget what tribe he was, but anyway, of course, my wife is into all that kind of stuff, into paranormal and all that, and he don't know me from Adam. There was a bunch of people around the table looking at casts and stuff, and he just looked me right square in the eyes, like he picked me out of the bunch, and just stared me right square, and never blinked, neither did I, because he got my attention. He said, he had his hand on one of the casts we got out of Lake George, and he said, "This is a female. She wants you to know that they're here to help us, not hurt us, but they want to be left alone."
Mm-hmm.
So then he turns around, he walks out, and boy, boom, my wife was right behind him. And she talked to him for quite a while. She can tell you more about the conversation she had with him outside than, because I didn't leave.
Mm-hmm.
I said, that's sort of odd, because a lot of people who, did you act like you were threatened? No. I had no, was I scared and all that stuff? Yeah, but not like a kid with a boogeyman underneath the bed. You know what I'm saying? You got the fear factor going, and you're looking at something, like I said, don't exist, and yet there it is right there in front of you, and you're trying to figure out in your own mind, what the hell is it? And yet I don't know, it's just crazy. Like I said, when I got down the other end of the field and turned and did 3 more of those guttural things,
mm-hmm.
It was like I just got a feeling of calm. It's an odd thing to explain. I guess you'd have had to been there and been through it. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's sort of counterintuitive because you'd think, you encounter this essentially it's an animal or creature or whatever you want to call it. It's a wild
Hmm.
animal. It's not human. It's not supposed to exist, so you're seeing it, and like you said earlier, like your life is flashing before your eyes, like, and in just split seconds, like so much is happening in your mind of
Yeah,
what am I seeing?
exactly.
How can this be possible? You're frightened not because of what it's doing, but you're saying that it's growling, it's grunting. So most people would see that as an aggressive behavior, that this thing is warning you away, like get away or I'm going to hurt you. But yet you're saying, like, in your mind, you're being calmed. You're saying this thing is telling you,
Yeah,
I'm not going to hurt you. We just want to be left alone.
I
Um,
figured the brightness of the spotlight hitting it or square in the face. That's why it did the put his head back. Maybe there was pain in the eyes or something. I don't know.
mhm.
That's the only thing I could ever figure is the brightness of the light hurt, and it let me know it hurt.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
everybody always say, why didn't you just shoot it? Why do you just don't? Well, because you don't know what it is and shoot it. Number
right.
one. I don't know if it, well, from the stories I've read and things I've heard from people in the military that it's supposedly, yeah, I'm not going to touch base there, but
Mm.
it would take a lot more than 357 to put them on the ground. A lot more.
Exactly, exactly. And also, you're talking about a split second decision. I mean, this could have been, I mean, by the time you've kind of assessed and said, okay, this is not a person, this is not a bear, this is not, by the time you've assumed that, this thing is already walking away. So why shoot it? But in that split
Exactly.
second, you're not going to shoot this because maybe it is someone playing a prank. You don't know that in that
Hmm.
initial few milliseconds of this.
Exactly.
I see this thing. Your brain is trying to process it, and again, it's not. I mean, if it was running towards you, maybe you would have, taken a few shots
Well,
to
that would have
protect
been
yourself.
definitely would have been different. Yes.
Right, but it
Yes.
wasn't being aggressive. It just looks like it was being
No.
curious, or and maybe hungry. Like you said, if this thing looked a little lean, maybe that's why he was encroaching on the town and encroaching on the road, and
Hmm.
trying to come in and find a dumpster or a trash can or just something to grab some food from. So
Yeah.
I don't blame you for not
There's
shooting it.
there's just so much that goes with these things. It's like how can you be following what you think are Bigfoot tracks, 4.5, 5 foot stride, walking in the snow, and then it stops and it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And then the scientists thought, well, there was probably a breeze blowing in from one direction or the other from that point on in that field. That's what filled all those tracks in. Well, when you're walking in 1.5 foot of snow, it's not going to fill in 1.5 foot deep track with a little bit of blowing snow. You know what I'm saying? And I've always said since day one, I even, but anyway, that I think they travel up and down, the heavens down and back.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, why did anybody ever found a body? Well, either they bury their own or they take their dead back
Yeah.
to wherever they came from. That's just my own opinion. It's the only thing that makes any sense.
Yeah, and it's just such a mystery because we all have our sort of opinions. I mean, I've spoken to people who think these are extraterrestrial, that they come from portals, that they're just undiscovered apes,
Well,
and
that's
I'm
right.
kind of more on the biological side. I kind of tend to feel like they're apes. But then there's things like you just mentioned, like, and I was talking to my friend Josh about this like a couple of weeks ago, just the trackways that just end. And like you said,
Yeah,
like in 2 feet of snow, like you have this trackway, it goes out into the meadow and then it just disappears. And it's like, well, if that was a person hoaxing it, that person still has to walk out somehow,
well,
take
they
the
had a buddy with a helicopter. She picked them up and flew
exactly,
away with them.
or a helicopter,
Yeah,
which is a lot to hoax because that's a lot of
yeah.
effort. Like, you're renting a helicopter, or I mean, it's just a lot of work to hoax footprints in a remote location when you don't even know anyone's ever going to see them. And then
Right,
no one ever
right.
comes forward, never ever comes and says, "Ha ha, that was me." I mean, there have been a few instances
Yeah,
of that,
right. Exactly. Good
but
point.
you never hear anybody go into the news and saying, "Oh, I faked those tracks." And a lot of these tracks are found in places where they're very unlikely to be found. I mean, people will be deep in the woods
Well,
and say, "Oh, I came
thanks
across
for
these."
that too, because how the hell now? Using common sense. One of the casts we've got, or a guy that used to be in our group. He's from up North Creek, and he was way back in the boonies during deer season. And he said on private property, about 7 miles to the closest road. He come across these tracks. He got one hell of a he did get a hell of a good print anyway. And what's the sense of, say, you or I grabbing all this heavy weight, throwing it on our back with a makeshift footprint you've made, going back in the boonies, putting it in there and stomping up and down on it and putting the weight on it and everything else and dragging everything back out with the hopes that somebody's going to find it.
Yeah, it makes no sense. If I was going to hoax somebody,
Exactly.
I'm going to go to my buddy's backyard and say, oh, he's out of town for the weekend. I'm going to go and put a whole bunch of like weird footprints in the mud behind his house. And then when he comes home and, you know, goes out there to water his lawn, he's going to be like, oh my God, Bigfoot was here. You don't go 5 miles into the woods, into the wilderness where nobody may go for months. Or if they do go, like the footprints are going to be melted away or washed away, and do a mile-long track of prints for someone to find and then never take credit for it. It's just weird to me. Again, not out of the realm of possibility. I know there's people out there who hoax and make fake footprints and videos, but how plausible is it for some of these, like when they're found way out in the middle of nowhere, or like you said, the tracks just disappear? And you know, some people say they've shot these things and they've bled and they've screamed, and then other people say I've shot it and it's like the bullets went right through it, like it had no effect. So you just don't know. There's plenty there to kind of sway you one way, but then you read other stories and it makes you question that, because you're like, well, how did this thing walk into the middle of the field and then it left no tracks coming out, or it walked down to the water of a river and then there's no tracks on the other side? Like, where did it go? Just really weird stuff. And I think it's very interesting that you kind of heard this thing in your head, because we hear that, you know, not in every case, but we do hear that a lot. I know, like Les Stroud, Survivor Man, he mentioned that he kind of felt these things were talking to him. And I hear different things. I hear some people will say it's like an actual language in their head, and some people will say it's more of just an idea, a flash of something. Like they'll just get like an image of a gun in their head, and like it's almost like this thing is asking about the gun, like what are your intentions with that gun? So I do think it's very interesting that this thing was growling, but you also got this sense of calm and the sense that this thing was not going to hurt you. It just wanted to be left alone.
Well, like I told you, we were roughly 1,500 to 2,000 feet apart, me and the trooper. And if in that night, if it wanted to cross the road, it could have crossed the road in between us. We'd have never even saw it. Well, it came out to him first, then he left, and it come all the way across, down that bank, all the way across that field and up the slight hill to me. And that, in fact, I can't remember who it was. There's a word for it. I don't know if you've ever, I'll tell you. Maybe you can tell me if you've ever heard of it. I've had two different people tell me that there's certain word, that there are people out here right now that are meant to see certain things that other people won't see. And there's a word for it. And I couldn't even pronounce the damn word. It's like the word encyclopedia. It's about that long, you know. It's,
okay.
I don't know what it was, but one of the guys at the Bigfoot group, at the Bigfoot Festival, told me, and he was a professor up in New Hampshire,
okay,
college up there, and he said there are people out here, and he said there's a lot of them admit it, but he said there are people here that see things that nobody else is going to see, and there's a reason for it. And I said, well, what's the reason? That's what I'd like to know. But nobody on the face of this earth will ever tell me I was looking at a bear or a man in a monkey suit.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you know, it's every individual experience, and it can be tough because people are gonna, you know, oh, prove it, and you know, oh, you just saw this, and they're gonna try to tell you what you saw, and I understand people questioning things and being a little skeptical, but at the same time, you know, you were law enforcement, you were a police officer, you know, you guys are trained for that, and you hear this like from military or from pilots and from highly trained individuals. It's not just you know, skeptics want us to believe it's people who are drunk and they're doing drugs, and it's kids in the woods and they're just out there scaring themselves. And it's like, well, that doesn't apply to most of the sightings, which are
it doesn't.
From law enforcement or doctors or lawyers or military people or educated people who are hunters. You know, you get somebody who's been hunting for 40 years. They know what a bear looks like, and they'll see something and say, oh, I'm never going in the woods again. Like, I saw this thing. It wasn't a bear. I'm not going hunting anymore. Done. You know,
Yeah.
this is like this guy's
Yeah.
lifelong passion, and they give it up. They didn't see a bear. They saw something they
Yeah.
literally could not explain. And I don't know what these things
Exactly.
are, whether, you know, and you can say they're hallucinations. You can say they're, you know, primitive memories, or, you know, aliens, whatever you think they are. People are
Right.
seeing them, and people who,
Right.
you know, and you know, your encounter was really interesting because it wasn't just you. It was this other trooper,
Hmm.
uh, who, you know, saw this and left the scene because he saw something that his brain could not process. And like you said, he never wanted to talk about it
Exactly.
again. I saw nothing. I saw nothing. But he
Yeah,
was
but he
clearly
talked. The odd
traumatized.
thing of it was too, Jay says that he talked to his partner and my dispatcher, but never talked to me again. I've never seen the man since then. He last time I heard he was taking fingerprints for the FBI out in Massachusetts or someplace out in that neck of the woods.
Wow.
So I don't know to this day why he didn't admit. You know, because I asked him why the hell did you leave me out there by myself?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't see nothing.
Yeah, and
You
I
know,
think there's
your
just,
guess is as good as mine.
yeah, I think there's just some people who can't, like, their brains won't accept what they saw. And,
Exactly.
you know, and I think
Exactly.
maybe he had a little embarrassment, like leaving you, um, because he was scared, you know, and he fled the scene. You know, he's a police officer, he's a state trooper, and he left you there, you know, knowing that there's this thing there that scared him
Yeah, enough
out of his
to make him
mind.
leave.
Yeah, enough to make him leave, and he left you there. He, you know, you could be scared and stay with you. And all right, now there's two of us at least. um,
Exactly.
did you ever get any sort of
Exactly.
backlash from the department? Did you, like, your superiors ever
Oh
tell you
yeah.
don't talk? Yeah, I can imagine.
Well, I come up in a little hick town. You might say Whitehall. I consider it a hick town because, to
Hmm.
be honest with you, on the air or not, one of the most crooked police departments I ever worked for in my life.
Really?
And oh yeah, you couldn't arrest certain people. You got time off with no pay, so on and so forth, and that kind of stuff. But Dan Gordon was told to keep his mouth shut from his experience. I was not told to keep my mouth shut because I kept my mouth shut anyway.
Okay.
Right? Because I took so much bullshit with the harassment and making fun of. And it wasn't just me they're making fun of. The whole goddamn the whole damn family. Because your
Yeah.
name was Goz and you're all wacko. You
Right.
know, I said, yep. It all depends on who. It's like any other small town. It all depends on who you are. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
It's just like being in school. It's you know, if you're not with the clan, you're nobody. So,
Yeah.
but when this one guy in particular, I can't mention his name. I'd love to, but he was one of the main factors in making fun of us and all that bullshit because he knew the whole family. And just happened to be they had an Indian powwow in our town park there one year, and guess what he's selling? He's a hell of a whittler, hell of an artist, hell of a carver. He's selling these little Sasquatch statues and stuff from
Of
three, four
course.
different sizes and making money off it,
Making money
right?
off it.
And sure. So I walked up to the table. I said, "Hey, bud, how you doing? Hey, Brian, how you doing?" I said, "Pretty good." There was 3, 4 people at the table manhandling these things he had whittled, so on and so forth. And he says, "It did something." He says, "What's that?" I says, "You're one of the men, guys that used to make so much fun of us for our experience." And I said, especially with me, with what I went through and everything else. And I said, here you are making money on it. But are you a believer now? Those people looked at me, looked at him, and walked away, put the stuff right now and walked away. Don't you ever do that to me again. I says, what goes around comes around, bud. I said, but he himself has been out in investigations and found things he can't explain now because he's into it somewhat. I said, I'll be damned. That's
Yeah.
something. But then the Bigfoot Festival evolved, and all the people now are believers.
Mm-hmm.
But when we had the festival, 99% of the people are from out of state, out of town. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
And the reason my wife and I wrote the book is we got so tired of watching these makeshift documentaries being made, people representing, that's me. They're me
Mm-hmm.
at the whole incident. And in fact, the first book that was written was Monsters of the North Woods. We've got probably the only copy left.
Mm.
And last time they were selling them online, they were going for almost $100.
Wow.
And I took that book and I outlined the whole story It goes from one page to a different chapter, different things. 90% of what's in there is wrong. They had my father as chief of police. They've had me as a sheriff. You name it. The whole story is completely fabricated and prefabricated. 90% of it's not true. The cops show up with lights and the night of my thing. They showed up lights and sirens. Never happened. This never happened. That never happened. What about this? This is pertinent information. It's not even in the book. But my wife finally said, Brian, about time we sat down and wrote your story, your encounter. You're the one that had the encounter, you and the trooper.
Right.
And that's when we published the book, Abair Road, the true story. And I've had, honest to God, Jason, I've had hundreds of calls from people thanking me for writing the truth and writing the true story. And the only thing they find wrong with it is too short. I said, I don't ad-lib and I don't make stuff up. That's it in black and white print right there.
No, and I appreciate that. And I've even said on this show before, like, I love the stories that aren't fantastic like that, because some people want to tell you stories. I saw this Bigfoot and then it ran down the hill and it chased me, and then 2 more Bigfoot showed up and they cornered me. And I almost feel like those stories are just, they lose me because they just don't seem real. It's
no,
you don't need
it's
to
like
embellish.
Seeing the perfect cast.
Yeah.
We had a gentleman give us a picture of a cast. In fact, it happened to be down maybe a quarter mile from where I told you about the 2 prints we got at that one investigation a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
It happened to be down the stream. It's the most perfect cast footprint you've ever seen in your life. I looked at Sue and I said, what's wrong with that picture, Sue? She said, what do you mean? What's wrong? Look at that cast. I said, it's too freaking perfect.
Yeah.
I said, look at all the casts we've got. Have you ever had such a perfect cast? I said, if they're standing in the sandy beach before the tide comes in, go get that cast. That's a perfect cast. But I said, no, I don't believe it. Of course, people wouldn't let us go down there anyway. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah, but
I've had. Go ahead.
No, good. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like, good stories don't need that embellishment. And I'm sorry that people have taken your story and tried to make it into something it's not. And I think it's just the sensationalization of the paranormal, of Bigfoot, of everything. Like, they want to make these stories into these really big dramatic events, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's just, and the sighting itself is just remarkable enough. You don't need the sirens and all the department showed up with their lights going and sirens.
There were so many people said they were there. It's outrageous. I said, no, they weren't even there. What the hell is going on with this whole picture? This guy, every time I see something like that, I get madder and madder and madder. And there's one guy in particular, and I can't mention his name. He's been riding our coattails, my coattails, and now he's the professor of all Bigfoot stuff. He's never had an encounter. Very, very rare for him to do an investigation, because it's just, like I said, that's why we wrote the book. And now people are actually calling me when they have a possible sighting or vocalization or something like that. They find me on the computer.
Yeah.
The only place we advertise the book is in the book is the Big Apple Diner and Amazon. We don't push that book out there on anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But it's made its way overseas and everything else. The book has.
Yeah, I have a copy.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, my friend Josh, his mom, Nitsa, she actually gave me a copy a couple of years ago. I've read it. My son read it. So yeah, and it's great to get the firsthand story. I know who you're talking about and who you don't want to name. It's just you get people writing the coattails and people who want to come in, and now they're the expert. And they've gotten to where they are, stepping on the shoulders of all the witnesses and all the people who aren't out there making money, because that's not what the story's about. It's not about, like, I want to make money and I want to be on TV and I want to, sell the rights to my story. It's just, this is what happened to me and I'm happy to tell it, but I'm just living my life. And
that's why we had the book copyrighted, so it can't be rewritten and misprinted, put it that way. I don't know. But it's just crazy. I could keep you on the phone all night just telling you different things where state troopers have showed up. I got to tell you this one in particular, but I got into scrapping for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And my cousin Janie moved back into her parents' house, and he was into a little bit of everything. I put it this way: he made about $7,000 in scrap in 2 months. And that was just putting a dent in the property. But I had it lined up along my western part of my driveway.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife comes home from work one day. She says, Brian, what? Is get that damn mess cleaned up. I said, I'm sorting it. Because why sell something for $100 where I can disassemble it and sell the motor for $50 and that for that, and you make more money that way.
Mm-hmm.
I said, all right, I'll get right to it. So one morning I said, Dad, I'm not going to work today. Stayed home and I started packing stuff up and whatnot. Nobody's home in the whole neighborhood, just my sister-in-law. I see a state trooper pulled in my yard about 11 o'clock in the morning. What the hell? I'm thinking somebody say I stole something out of their yard or something, or is he looking for something or somebody? Well, here's this guy, honest to God, when he got out of the car, he had to duck. He's sitting in his seat and he had to duck and get his legs out and then push himself up. The guy had to have been close to 7 foot tall.
Wow.
The first thing he's got his right hand over his name tag over his left breast. And all I can see is SKI, the last three letters of his name. So he was a Polish guy anyway. Tall, thin guy. And he just gets out of the vehicle and he's looking around. And he hasn't said a boo. He hasn't said boo to me. And I said, excuse me, sir. I said, can I help you? He sort of came to and says, no, but I can help you. And he pointed at the sign on the side of my truck. It's got a Bigfoot. It says Northern Sasquatch Research Society. I said, what do you mean you can help me? He says, that right there. I said, really? I go, so you're going to tell me? Night before, him and his partner in two different cars got called up to Putnam, which is the borderline between the two different barracks. Say, they cover to a certain line, then the next troop covers from that line north or whatever.
Okay.
But they had to go up and back up some troopers up in Putnam. There was a domestic dispute involving weapons. He said on the way back, coming down towards South Bay Bridge, he said I come down the hill. It was about 3:30 in the morning, from what I could recollect. He says, I saw something in the road. Of course, the troopers' lights on their car are a lot brighter than yours and mine. And he said, this thing just filled the front of his vehicle. And he said, it was very, very tall. He said, taller than me. And this guy, I swear to God, had to have been 6'11" anyway. And he says, it was taller than me, and it was huge, dark colored. And the opposite side of the field, where it went to, they had the big, huge, round hay bales that year. And the side it come off of is like my area, off in my direction. That's where a lot of them seen them over in that neck of the woods. But anyway, he said it covered the width of the field, grass to grass. He said in about 8 to 10 steps. It would take you and me probably 15, 18. And it went out in the field. Now he's got his car completely across 22 north out of Whitehall, shining out into the field. So he gets on the radio and tells his partner, he said, don't be going real fast when you come down the hill by Pike Brook Road. He says, you got to see what I'm looking at. Well, the other guy saw it too, and he never even mentioned his name to me or anything like that. But he says this thing was behind the bale, but he said it was head and at least 1.5 feet of shoulders above that bale.
Wow.
Now I can stay at that bale and it hits me just about in the throat. And I said, well, I think that thing's got to be 7.5, 8 foot tall. He said, I told you it was taller than me. He said it would duck down behind the bale, then it looked back up to see, if I was still there, so on and so forth. And finally it just stood up, turned, and headed towards the head of South Bay. And he said, went across that field. He said, I watched it until it dropped down into a ravine over there. He said, that's where I lost it. And he said, I figured I'd come up and tell you about it today. So I went out that day, and there's like a little tributary that comes off of South Bay. It's all marshy and muddy and yucky stuff and blah, blah, blah. But same thing. You got down there with the brush and stuff. You swear to God, a water buffalo went down the bank, and it was the same old thing. It's all clay. You could see the slide marks, and you could actually make out somewhat of a print on the other side, going up the other side, headed up in towards, in the direction of the Hogtown, Lake George, right, headed off in that direction, where they all seem to be headed. Even from up in this neck of the woods, that's the direction they're headed in. 99% of the time, rare to get one coming backwards. They always seem to be headed in that direction.
Wow.
Everything, all the reports like that we have a map, and you could almost draw a straight line. And it's like a deer trail, deer, rabbits, everything. All use the same runways all the time. It's just like what it is, a big runway. You know what I'm saying? But this trooper says, he says, you can talk about this and write it up if you want, but you can't use my name. I said, how the hell can I tell? All I can see is the last three numbers or letters in your name. Well, he said, I thought I'd just be nice enough to stop and let you know. And it was within 2 weeks, a Vermont state trooper coming. I live right on the Vermont border. You come out of Vermont, go past my house, over on the Abair Road, take a right, and it takes you into Vermont. In other words, you can get to West Haven a lot faster going to my house than you can going up Route 22 out of Fairhaven, then going over. And what he saw right here, I'm looking at the spot roughly 700, 800 feet away. One across the road right there, and it was in late winter. It was early spring where it was thawing during the day and freezing at night, and I found one of the most perfect casts in the ice up behind my sister-in-law's house, and there was a small one with it. And all I had was pictures of it, and I lost my phone in a great big mud puddle over my boss getting rid of scrap.
Geez.
Never did find the phone, but that's all I figured. I went over there on my hands and knees. I couldn't find it. Beautiful pictures. My wife did see them. I brought her up and showed them. But anyway, I said there's all kinds of stuff involving law enforcement that have come forward to me. They don't really want to go to anybody else.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's great that they have you to go to, and they know that they can tell you, because again, there's even though it's more accepted these days, and there's the TV shows and there's the podcasts, and there's still that stigma to it, and especially if you're in the military or law enforcement or any sort of high profile position like that, you don't want to go to your superiors. You don't want to go to even other people you may work with. You don't know who you can trust. You don't know who's going to believe you and who's going to report you and be like, this guy's crazy. He's seeing UFOs, or he's seeing Bigfoot.
Carrying a gun,
Right? Yeah, exactly.
There's just things that military people have told me. People in Vietnam, people that were in Iraq, things that they experienced is outrageous. And my son was in the Special Forces and Marines, and he told us a story where supposedly this all stemmed from Alaska. They got a phone call from somebody up there, and they sent one Marine, 2 Army guys. Anyway, there was 4 of them, military people, and they supposedly shot a female. Then realized there was a young woman with her, killed it, and then the woods went ballistic, and this thing come across the field on what you would call dead run for one of them. And supposedly took 20 some odd shots to put this thing down, and supposedly they took all 3 bodies.
Jeez. And
they headed out to Area 51 or whatever it is out in the western part of the country. And this came out of a guy's mouth that was, Special Forces and the Marines, and one of the men involved in that was, in that whole ordeal, was with his troop.
Wow. And see, again, these are people who are not looking to make money.
Excuse me?
I said these are people who are not looking to make money. They're not going to TV shows. They're not going to book publishers. They're coming to you knowing, like, hey, like, I'm going to tell you my story, but don't use my name. Don't tell anybody. Or, if you do tell anybody, change my name or don't give my name. Or and those, to me, are the really interesting stories. And again, could people be lying? Sure. But what is the payoff for them to lie, to like make time to come out and talk to you and sit down with you and tell you the story, and then they disappear? And it's just, they just had to tell somebody. And are they lying? Maybe. Are they mentally ill? Maybe. But how many of these people are mentally ill? Maybe one or one in a dozen or so, maybe lying, possibly. or possibly. I mean, we don't know. But to have all these stories, and even just for me doing the show, I've only been doing the show a little short of 2 years now, but I get emails from a lot of people, and same thing. They don't want me telling it. They don't want me going on air with it. They don't want me sharing their name, but they will tell me stories. And these are not people looking for fame or fortune, or they just want to be heard. And I always keep it confidential. I don't bring it on the air. I just, but I do have people sending me stories about things they've seen, and it's mostly Bigfoot stuff. But really interesting stories, not embellished, nothing like wild or crazy. It's, a very quick sighting, a road crossing or just something in the woods, or, Well,
you get a lot of the road crossing ones. We do.
Yeah.
We do.
That's.
Oh, I got one more I got to throw at you.
Oh,
Jason,
sure.
If you got the time.
Yeah, definitely. I don't want to keep you all night, but yeah, if you got time for one more, let's do one more.
This was quite a while back. It's the sheriff going to an accident. This is Warren County, right up here by me. I'm in Washington County. Warren County borders us. Was headed up the Northway, and I know it was above Lake George, And he says he's on the lower. In other words, you got the lanes are going north and the lanes headed south. And he said he's going up to answer some kind of a call. I forgot what I don't remember if it was it wasn't a motor vehicle accident. Anyway, he had to go up north for something.
Okay.
And it was snowing out, and he said he see this big vehicle on the left-hand side up on the southbound lane swerve really bad, and it was a bus, a tour bus like. He said he thought he was coming down over the guardrails. He said it looked like he had hit something, and then he swerved back over and just kept going. Well, as this sheriff's going up through, this thing come up out of the ditch in between the northbound and southbound lane, come over, got up in the road, and he said, holy love of God, I don't even know the sheriff's name. This is just a story we got from a friend of his. He hit it with his patrol car.
Jeez.
On the passenger side in the front. And it went down over the bank, down towards Lake George. And he stopped the car, and there was blah, blah. Next thing you know, he's calling it in. Next thing you know, he's being stopped by the state troopers. And they said, you don't go. We'll take care of the call. You don't go anywhere. What do you mean, don't go anywhere? He said, I was just involved with an accident. But he said, you didn't hit nothing. You didn't see nothing. He said, you just head back to wherever you came from. He said, we'll take care of the rest of it. He said, there he is, a Warren County sheriff, and this guy was more or less just like you or I, get the hell out of here.
Wow.
He said, what happened from that point on? He said, he still to this day don't know what happened.
Jeez.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, I could tell you all kinds of stories that we've been told. And some of them are professional people. And I want to make this perfectly clear to anybody that may be listening to this, is I don't care if you wear a badge or not. I don't care if you're ex-military or not. I do not disregard anybody, and just because you're a plain Jane on the street, you're not a liar. Not to me. And I do not put words in anybody's mouth. I do an interview. You tell me what you saw, what you experienced. I won't say to you, well, did this happen? Did you see this? No, that's not the way you do an interview.
Right.
And it's amazing. It's amazing how many people you catch with their pants down, especially doing an interview.
Oh yeah, yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of those stories out there too, of just the authorities, whoever the authorities are, whether it's park rangers or state troopers, or and just kind of taking over, and saying, we'll take it from here. You didn't see anything. It was just a bear. And kind of that, like,
and I don't understand that part of it. What's the reason for that? What is the reason for that? What the hell reasoning would make somebody do that? Or I don't know. I really don't know. There's just so much about all this UFO stuff and Bigfoot stuff and the paranormal and stuff like that. Why do they try to pound it into your head it's not real?
I wish I had an answer for you. And
I bet a lot of people do.
Yeah, I don't know, but it almost makes it worse. Like when they do that, like, because that, we want to know. And it's when people sort of keep you from that information, it just makes people want to know even more.
Well,
so it's interesting.
John F. Kennedy himself, who said that anything that they find in outer space, see in outer space, pictures there that was supposed to be made public, and that they wanted to share what knowledge they had with UFO with Russia. And shortly after that is when the man was killed.
Yeah.
That's been on different programs. He said you put two and two together. There was an awful lot of stuff about John F. Kennedy's assassination, him and his brother.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know yourself, for Christ's sake, there's more out there than the government will ever let you know.
Exactly. And some of it I hear the government doesn't even know. I mean, those are other stories that, you hear people who work in the government and they're like, we don't even know. So that's why we keep it quiet. And you just, you don't know who to... Go ahead.
Well, the president they won't even tell the president.
Oh, yeah.
But
this is all...
What president was it, though, that took Jackie Gleason, the place down in Mexico, and he said Jackie Gleason made the statement, I did see an alien body. And it was one of the presidents that took him there.
Yeah, I forget offhand which one it was, but I do remember that story, too. And you just don't know how much of it is disinformation, how much of it is true, how much of it is just they don't know. It's hard to say. And it's just
you know yourself, too, Jason, is that in the sense that they've been jamming it down everybody's throats for 70, 80 years. Oh, it's a bunch of bullshit. It's weather balloons, swamp gas, it's everything. But now they're releasing all these files, hundreds and hundreds of files that they can't. Now they're trying to disprove the Tic Tac one with what the hell's his name there? The guy that gave up his standings with the government. Just to let the truth be known about the Tic Tac incident with the aircraft carrier and the battleships and everything else.
Oh, I can't think of his name right now.
Coast.
Yeah.
Lazari or something like that.
Bob Lazar?
Mm.
No.
No,
he was Area 51.
Yeah, he was Area 51.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name right now.
But they're trying to disprove all that now. And the government's already admitted they don't know what they are. None of those things that they had on tape.
Yeah.
Somebody made that all up and gave it to them, so they're following through and making a cartoon. That was like the first documentary they did with the gang, and I would call them out of Matt Moneymaker crew. The first movie they did up here in Whitehall about that incident. Honest to God, I was never so disgusted, just totally disgusted with the whole bunch. It was just like being with Walt Disney and watching a cartoon being made. Oh yeah, yeah. Honest to God, and even Matt Moneymaker admitted after the fact that he was really disgusted how the movie come out. I said it wasn't a movie; it was an effing cartoon.
Yeah,
that's just what it was like. I mean, Jesus, Doug Highcheck was involved in it, and he spent years with that good old woman there studying gorillas and all that stuff, and another high-named woman from out west, blonde woman, can't think of her name, go to hell for it. I said, what the hell is this all about? They're out putting cat food out next to trees, out in the boonies. What are you going to get there? Coyotes, foxes, raccoons? He says, there's something right on tape right there. We had one of those heat seek. I said, for Christ's sakes, you can look at it. You can tell it's a raccoon, for Christ's sakes. Oh, no, he said. And I said, well, did this happen this way? No. He said, it's our movie. We'll make it our way. And that's when I said, the hell with you.
Yeah.
The hell with you. I said, I'll be so, my God. And there was a few after that. It was just a joke, just a running joke.
Yeah, it's a shame because they're all just chasing money. They all have to sensationalize.
That's what it is.
Dramatize it and just make it like Hollywood ready and like an action movie or a horror movie.
All it is entertainment, just like big time wrestling. Entertainment.
Yeah, and they don't want the truth. And that's, I've been offered to go on TV. I've done a few TV shows, but the only shows I've done are the ones where I'm like, I don't want a script. I want to be able to tell my story.
That's right.
But I've had shows, I've had producers come to me and say, we want you to do this. And I was like, nope, I'm not doing it. And they're like, oh, but we're going to pay you. And I said, I don't care. I'd rather live an honest life in obscurity than sell my soul to tell lies. Like, I'm not in the entertainment business. I'm in, this can be entertaining, but I'm not here to entertain people with falsehoods. I want real stories. And, if people don't like the real stories, and that's, go put on the Discovery Channel. There's Ghost Adventures.
I couldn't live with myself, Jason. I couldn't live with myself if I ever followed through with something like that.
Yeah,
Let them tell you what to say. No, you don't want to say that. This is what you want to say. That's what they've done with so many different articles and books about this whole Abair Road incident.
Yeah.
I swear to God, I wasn't even there. That's what it boils down to. I don't even think I was there.
Yeah. So, I mean, but that's why I'm glad you wrote the book. I'm glad you come on people's podcasts and tell your version of the story and not someone else's version where they're just trying to sell books or sell DVDs or TV shows. And I like that you come on and tell your version of the story. And it stays the same. It's always the same story, but that's why I love it. Because it's honest,
I like
it's
talking
true.
to people like you because you are open-minded.
Mm-hmm.
You know where to bear craft in the woods, put it that way, and you don't pull no punches.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of people I like to talk with, people that can understand where you're coming from, so on and so forth. And I tell all these young people, I got kids, I got 8, 9-year-old kids all the way up into their teens and early 20s that are really, really, really interested in this stuff. I said, great, because we need people like you to keep pursuing what we're doing.
Right.
To start with. And it does. It pays off. I mean, even when we did the 2 years I did the Rutland Fair,
mm-hmm.
they took an old building over there. It's right next to Route 7, right across the street from McDonald's, by the fairgrounds. And my wife and I did it the first year, and the second year I did it alone.
Mm.
But the second year, we went over to tell our story, but they had us way out in the boonies, away from all the main attractions and stuff. She said, well, that'd be better for you. Not really, because I think we had 30, 40 people the first day. And the second day, I think I had 60 people.
Wow.
This is the last year we did it. And this gentleman comes walking in. I just started my presentation. He walks in. Everybody's sitting down, and we were playing a video. My wife and I were playing a video on her laptop thing, and everything. All people were watching that and listening to it, and had different people like Paul Bartholomew from Whitehall talking about the history of Bigfoot and so on and so forth. And this guy comes walking in. Looks at me, looks at the crowd, and walks right up to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And just like he was the only one there with me, right?
Mm-hmm.
He says, where'd you get the cast? I said, excuse me? I said, we got a presentation. Why don't you have a seat? No, he said, he's got a suit on, a little short guy, probably in his 30s. No, he said, I just like know where the casts come from. Who took them for you? I said, I did them. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
You did them? I suppose you've probably seen one. I looked at him, I said, yes, sir, I have.
Mm.
Oh my God, this is such a bunch of. He's going off. He's going off on me. And people applauded me after he finally left. And I said, yeah, I says to him, I said, I'll bet you don't believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. I'll bet you don't believe in life after death. And I said, you probably don't even believe in yourself. And I said, you're either a biologist, a school teacher, or a science teacher, or something in the local school here. So what the hell is your problem? I said, well, I'm getting the hell out of here. I said, well, we'll see you. Have a good day. And people stood up and applauded me for just, I didn't lose it with him, put it that way.
Yeah. Good.
But anyway, after all was said and done, we had a good, probably an hour-long presentation. And, I told my story, so on and so forth. And we got some good stories out of that anyway, people from Chittenden and all that stuff, Vermont. But after the fact, and this made me feel like $1 million. It really did. A man and a woman come walking up. Younger than me. Both the father and daughter were both professors up in New Hampshire University. One of them taught anthropology, and the other was something to do with biology and studying of bones and all that stuff. It said, Mr. Gosselin, he says, I've been to several. He said things like this. He said, I wanted to try this one out because we heard of your story over there in New York. And he said, this is probably the best presentation I've ever seen. I said, well, thank you very much. He says, we do have incidents up in New Hampshire, too. I said, I know. I said, we hear through the grapevine the different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if I had the money, I said, I would be doing what Bobo and Renee and Matt Moneymaker, I would be doing what all them people are doing, but it would be on facts.
Right.
It wouldn't be on stories. I mean, when it gets to the point you bring dolls and cribs up into the woods and rock bands because they love to hear rock and roll music and they always travel the power lines. And I said, well, it's the truth. I'm telling the truth. I'm not bullshitting anybody. And I said, oh my God, we started watching at the beginning. Thought it was pretty interesting. Then when some of the stuff was going on, I said, now, let me ask you this. I haven't sat down and watched that clan in a long time. Mm-hmm. Renee's the only one that's got any brains. Her and, who the hell is the other guy's gone off on his own?
Cliff.
Cliff's not too bad.
Yeah.
But Renee's the science part of it, which is appreciative. Mm-hmm. The rest of them are just clowns. But anyway, they I just lost my train of thought on that one. Oh, have you ever seen them come out with a cast?
No. Honestly,
exactly.
Whenever I watch that show, I usually watch like the first half hour because that was always like when they did the town hall and they'd have like the local people.
Communities,
Yeah, the community would come out and tell their stories. And I always found those interesting. And then like the second half of the show, they'd go into the woods and they were shooting off fireworks or blasting rock music or whale song.
Like I said, exactly. But I have never, as many times as we've watched that show since, I've never seen them come out with a cast.
No.
We've got, between Bill's little museum where we used to have our meetings down at his place. He's dead and gone now, but we've probably got 25, 30 casts. And we've got at least almost a dozen just out of the east shore of Lake George, up in the hills there, up in that neck of the woods.
Yeah, because you're doing real investigations. You're not trying to film a TV show. So these guys are going out. There's craft services. There's, how many producers and sound technicians and directors. And, cameramen.
We used to sit there and laugh. He brought that big crying baby doll in a little makeshift doll crib up in the woods because they think it's one of their own. They're going, oh my God, where'd they come up with this stuff? But it was hilarious. It was sort of like watching a late night adult cartoon, I guess, or something like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like you said, it's like pro wrestling for Bigfoot. It's it's fake. It can be entertaining, but you can't take any of it seriously.
Those guys make, last I was told, and that was by a guy up in New Hampshire, they make $4,000 a piece per episode, and they have to buy and pay for nothing, buy nothing.
Right.
I say, that nice.
Yeah, it's
that nice.
It's acting. It's not real investigations.
Oh, yeah.
It's not real research. It's they're mugging for the camera, and they get their ad revenue, and they get their money from the cable stations and DVDs, and but it's not actually about looking for Bigfoot.
Exactly. Oh well, what are you gonna do?
Well, Brian, this has been awesome. I really appreciate your story and all the other stories you've been able to share tonight. Do you encourage people to reach out to you and tell you their stories? And because I know you said you still do investigations, so do you still take people out and do investigations?
Well, we don't take a lot of people. This group here, I just did I guess you want to call it a documentary. I walked them through the Abair Road incident. I took them to 3-4 other places where there have been reports that we have done investigations. We come up with one cast of these 3-4 places, but I said, if you ever want to do it by yourselves, I said, you're more than welcome to come down. You can go here, you can go there, blah, blah, blah. And they were really, really super appreciative. And they sent my wife a copy of the I guess documentary, whatever you want to call it. And they did a very, very good job. The daughter herself does all that and does all the editing, and she did a really, really good job.
Oh, cool.
And I said, guys like you, yes, I will take you out. But we get these fly-by-nights. I don't know if you know what I mean by that or not.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I don't. If I find a cast someplace today, and say if you were to get a hold of me and we were talking, I say, we just found a cast today. You'd say maybe, hey, you could take me up. I would take you up and show you. But in the same instance, there's our people out there like that. You take 1 or 2 people in, next thing you know, there's 15, 20 people up there.
Right.
They're up there banging on freaking trees and hooting and hollering. And Jesus, we don't. It's like I tell everybody, you don't know when you're doing tree knocks. Now, these things don't knock on trees just to communicate 24 hours a day. I said, there's a reason for it. And I said, you want to watch out what you're knocking on trees and what kind of tree it is and what the sound it makes. You don't know what you're calling out. You don't know what you're saying if that's the way they communicate.
Yeah, you could be sending out a marriage proposal.
Exactly. I got to go for that, but I won't say nothing. But yeah, but no, but you know what I'm saying? It's like
absolutely.
We've been putting radio signals out in the outer space for how many years? And one of the scientists, he just died here not too long ago. It was all a guy that was all crippled up in a wheelchair there.
Oh, Stephen Hawking.
Stephen Hawking. Watch out what you're asking for.
Yeah. Yep.
You don't know what you're asking for.
Yeah, you don't know who you're inviting here.
Exactly. Yep. And look at all the stuff we got going on now, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, but I mean, next time I get up there, we were talking about going out to Whitehall because Scott knows where the area is and everything, and we were actually talking about going out there. So maybe I can reach out to you when we're up there and see if. Yeah, definitely will.
Because these people that I took out the other day wanted to be able to camp in the field out there. I said, that's Nature Conservancy owns it. And I checked with them. And they said, no, we don't allow any camping. You're on our property, no open fires. But he said, you're more than welcome to walk the property. And we started, but it had rained the night before, and they were getting soaking wet. And he said, well, we'll be down some other time. And he said, you can take us down in. I can take you there. I took them down across onto the Vermont side and brought them to the spot where this thing come down the bank. We went up that far because that field, the perimeter of that field had all been mowed.
Oh, okay.
And but you get down in that neck of the woods. This upper end is one thing, but you get from that end over here in Abair Road to Whitehall on the Vermont side, it's like being back in the Amazon.
Wow.
I mean, it's marsh, thick, heavy wooded area of marsh that runs. It's got to be 6 miles long, and widest spot might be eighth of a mile or so. But the cattails and the water, and of course, you've got to be careful because there's so many damn rattlesnakes and stuff down in there. But
Wow.
It is. It's a crazy place. It's a
Mm-hmm.
crazy place.
Yeah. Well, I'll definitely give you a holler when we go up there and see if we can put something together, because I'd love to meet you in person, and I'd love to go see where, where you investigate and where you had this experience. It's a fascinating story.
Okay, very good.
Yeah. So
It sounds
again,
good to me.
yeah. So yeah, I'm going to let you get going because we've been talking for a while now. It's getting late.
That's all
But
right.
yeah,
I'll tell you, you get me on a roll on this subject, and I can keep you going all night long.
yeah. No,
Like I said, it seems good to me to be able to talk to another person that's
yeah.
not pulling you apart and putting you down and everything else. I love it because every once in a while I'll run into a group at the Big Apple Diner. There'll be a group
Mm-hmm.
from someplace. That's the guy right there. Oh my God, they make me feel like a king, for Christ's sake. I said, no. I said, only in my mind, not yours. But anyway, it's just nice to be able to speak freely. Put it that way.
Yeah. No, and I'm glad you can. Like I said, because I know people have kind of twisted your story over the years, and I just
Kinda.
yeah. Well, it's great to hear it from the source, and
Right.
and you had some other really good stories for us tonight. So yeah, I really appreciate it. And
Well, I appreciate you having me on the show.
yeah, anytime. And if you ever want to come back on, let me know. Give me a holler. But yeah, if we can arrange a meeting next time I'm up there, I would love that. So
Yeah, just let me know a day at a time. That's all.
yeah, awesome. Well,
Okay,
again,
man.
thank you so much for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it, and we will be in touch.
Well, thank you for having me, and have yourself a good night.
Thanks. You too, Brian.
Yeah, night now.
Night. Hey, take care. All right. I want to say a huge thank you to Brian Gosselin for coming on the show. Just such an amazing guest, and just such a huge perk for me doing this podcast and just getting to meet and talk to people like him. I followed his story for so many years, and he's just such a nice guy, so gracious, so down to earth. And like, he's the type of guy I could just, like, every night I can go to the bar and just have a few beers with him and just talk about everything, not just Bigfoot, but paranormal and politics and world events and philosophy, and just such a down to earth guy, so sweet, so nice, and an amazing storyteller. And his story is just so cool. I've always liked his story. It just always rings true to me. There's no embellishments. There's nothing there that says, hey, maybe he's making this up. It's just such a sincere story. And I understand there's people out there who are skeptical. They don't believe in Bigfoot, and they're going to say he's lying. I don't think he is. I think he honestly saw something that we don't know if it exists. And he was a police officer. He had a spotlight on this. He got a good look at it. This is not a misidentification. This was not a person in a suit. This was not a hoax. And I don't think he's lying. Like, this is just such a great story. I love the story. Great 100th episode. So Brian, thank you so much for coming on. I'd love to have you on again. We can talk more Bigfoot stuff. Not just his story, but so many people have come to him since he came forward with his story to confide in him. Military people, other law enforcement, just other from all walks of life. And he's got so many of these cool stories. And again, he's got to keep people anonymous, and that's what we have to do sometimes, and that's fine. But to hear, and to me, that just lends credibility. These are not people who are looking to go to conventions and be on TV shows and make book deals, and these people want to remain anonymous, but they want to tell their story. So to me, that just makes it ring a lot more true. Again, I can't say whether these stories are true or not. I can just say what I think, what my opinion is. I think Brian saw Bigfoot. That's just my opinion. I don't know. He'll be the only one who ever honestly knows for sure. Just like with these other stories. I mean, I read these stories from the BFRO website. I have other guests come on and talk about their experiences. I don't know. I can't say 100% for sure. But with Brian, I mean, he's just such a sincere guy, and he doesn't make money off this. Just so gracious to take people out into the woods and show them where he saw this creature, and show them other places where he's found footprints and other things of that nature. Who does that? He's not looking to make money here. He only published his book to get his side of the story out. He does these podcasts to get his side of the story out, because other people were, like he said, riding his coattails and trying to make money off of his story and changing the details and embellishing and trying to make it more dramatic. And he just tells the story as it is, and it doesn't change. And it's got some really cool elements to it. He, saw a lot of detail, the mind speak thing is a little interesting because you didn't really hear a lot of that back in the day. So I don't know if it's just people are experiencing it more or they report it more now. But I thought it was interesting how he was scared and this thing was basically just telling him, I'm not going to hurt you. We just want to be left alone. So really interesting story. Again, Brian, thank you so much for coming on. This was like, one of my dreams come true, just to be able to talk to people like you, these experiencers, people I've read about for years. And now I get to meet you and talk to you and get your side of the story and just laugh with you and listen to your stories. Again, I could listen to you all night. I didn't want to keep you too long, though. We were going like 2 hours and you were gracious enough to give me that. So, but I will definitely have you on again if you would like to come on. And I'm definitely going to hold you to that. I'm going to give you a buzz next time I'm up in your area and see if you can take us out to the site and show us around. I'd love to see where you experience this. So thank you, Brian, again. Everybody who's listening, thank you for sticking around 100 episodes. This is amazing to me. I went through a lot in the past couple of years. My family's been through a lot in the past couple of years. There were times I really just wanted to give this up. I thought about giving it up. I seriously considered giving it up. I never did. The only times I didn't do episodes were when my voice was gone. If I had the flu or, a cold and I just couldn't literally talk. Can't really do a podcast if you can't talk. So those are the only times I've ever missed episodes. It keeps me going. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking with me. If you're new here, welcome. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you enjoy what we do here. Plenty, 99 previous episodes you can go and listen to. If you've been with us for any length of time, thank you so much for watching and listening to me and giving me a voice every week and giving me an audience and giving me feedback, leaving the comments. I appreciate each and every one of you. I love talking to you guys. Everyone who's helped me with the show, John, Josh, Scott, Courtney, all you guys have been great. Christy and Lori for coming on, Olivia, Paula, Rachel, Zach, like all you guys, you're just so great. Every guest I've ever had on, I really appreciate you guys. You've helped me build the show into what it is. And I know I'm forgetting some people here, but it's late and we've been going a long time. But if I forgot to mention you, I'm sorry. Mike, Gail, I'm just trying to think of everybody who's been on the show. But 100 episodes, it's awesome. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you all. And here's to many more. And I hope you guys will follow, subscribe, leave reviews, leave comments. I love the interaction. I love getting feedback. Constructive criticism is totally fine. I know I say a lot and again, and that's me though. And that's just how I talk though. So, all right, everybody, until next time, question everything. Thank you, Brian. This was an awesome episode. I'm so psyched about this. I can't wait for you guys to hear this episode. But yeah, very cool episode. Thank you, Brian. Thank you guys for listening. And until next time, everybody, rock and roll.